Live from London, this is The World Today.
Hello, I'm Jamie Owen. Welcome to the programme. Our top stories. China's President Xi celebrates his country's close ties with Moscow in talks with Russia's Prime Minister. Our other headlines, search and rescue operations become recovery efforts in the aftermath of China's earthquake where 134 people died. Limiting the number of people who come to Europe, the European Union agrees big changes to the way it handles migration. And the leader of Hamas is in Egypt for what are being described as intensive ceasefire talks as pressure mounts for a truce. President Xi Jinping says China maintaining close ties with Russia is a strategic choice for both countries. Xi made his comments in talks with Russia's Prime Minister Mikhail Mishustin in Beijing. Both Xi and Mishustin called for more cooperation on energy and industrial supply chains. President Xi spoke of a strong economic partnership, saying annual targets for two-way trade had already been passed. Deliveries of Russian gas to China have hit record levels after sanctions following the conflict in Ukraine shut off supplies to other countries. Well, let's talk to our correspondent, Gao Ang, who's watching events for us in Beijing. Gao Ang, what else do we know about these discussions, these talks?
Yes, Jamie, during the meeting, President Xi said the governments, legislative bodies, political parties, and localities of China and Russia have carried out in-depth exchanges, and pragmatic cooperation in various fields has developed in a sound and steady manner. So over the first 11 months of this year, bilateral trade between China and Russia achieved the annual target of $200 billion. And she said that this shows the strong resilience and broad prospects for mutually beneficial cooperation between the two countries. He also said that maintaining and developing China-Russia relations is a strategic choice made by both sides based on the fundamental interests of the two people. He stressed that China's economy is resilient, with great potential and wide room for maneuver, and its fundamentals for long-term improvement have not changed. And China's firm promotion of high-quality development and high-level opening up will provide new opportunities for the development of all countries, including Russia. So Russian Prime Minister Mishustin also said that Moscow is willing to further tap its potential with China and expand cooperation in the economy, trade, energy, and connectivity. So during the meeting, both leaders also stressed the 2024 to 2025 China-Russia Years of Culture. They said both sides should design and carry out a great diversity of people-to-people and cultural exchange activities and consolidate the social and public opinion foundation of friendship between the two countries. Jimmy.
Gao Ang, thank you for that. Our correspondent Gao Ang in Beijing. Well, let's talk now to our correspondent Dasha Chernyshova in Moscow. Dasha, what is Russia hoping to get out of this visit by the Prime Minister?
Well, indeed, Russia seeks to diversify its partnership with China, and we understand from what Prime Minister Mikhail Mishustin has been saying that a lot of targets that have been set by Moscow and Beijing have been achieved. The trade turnover has indeed exceeded a very important benchmark of $200 billion, and it is expected to reach $218 billion by the end of 2023. That was the target set by the Russian president before. We also understand that now the task is to diversify the investment partnership between these two countries. Mikhail Mishustin said that there are 80 joint projects on which both Moscow and Beijing are cooperating in terms of the investment, and that has to grow. 90% of the settlements is being carried out in the national currencies. This is the so-called de-dollarization of trade between the two, and these figures have to increase. So the understanding is that this visit was once again making sure that the two countries are thinking in the same direction, and the Russian officials regularly point it out, and that they do more steps and take more steps to further boost cooperation at the regional levels between the regions of these two countries, but also between the businesses. That is one of the concerns that many here in Russia have been having. But nonetheless, we understand that those figures are growing, and those visits do help to alleviate the concerns and remove the difficulties when it comes to doing business between these two countries.
To what extent is Russia reliant now on China for its oil and gas exports?
Well, Russia definitely had to recalibrate its energy supplies, its energy exports, and it is now exporting 100 million tons of oil to China. That's the new record set in 2023. It is up by 22% against the year before. And Russia is the top supplier of oil to China, followed by Saudi Arabia. We also understand that Russia's Gazprom said it has set a new daily record over the weekend of deliveries to China on the its gas. So certainly Russia is reliant on China when it comes to the supplies of its energy resources. But at the same time, we understand that has been the trend since 2017. So we understand that Moscow intends to further increase its energy supplies to meet the demands of the Chinese economy.
Dasha, thank you for that. Our correspondent Dasha Chernyshova in Moscow. The number of people killed in China's earthquake has now reached 134. The emergency operation has now switched from search and rescue to recovery and caring for the survivors of the magnitude 6.2 earthquake. The quake struck the mountain's northwestern province of Gansu on Monday. Temperatures as low as -15 degrees have made the conditions extremely difficult, but survivors have been relocated in evacuation camps, and food and medicines have been arriving. Well, let's talk to our correspondent Shuxin Chen at an evacuation camp in Jijiashan County near the center of the quake. Shuxin Chen, the focus of the recovery efforts inevitably has now changed.
So, of course, according to an earlier presser, and the local authorities have mentioned the rescue and research mission has come to a close, and there are a couple of reasons for that really prompt conclusion for the rescue and research mission. The first, because the extremely low temperature that forced the rescue team to really try very hard to find all the people affected by the earthquake, buried or wounded or whatnot. And another thing, very key message here from experts from the rescue team here are saying, because due to local architectures, mostly bungalows, just single floor houses, and that made the canvassing mission a lot more easier, so that the rescue team can spot those buried under or those wounded easily. So it was faster and easier for the rescue team to really locate where these people affected by the earthquake. And that's the main two reasons why the authorities have announced the conclusion of the rescue and the research mission. And now it's not just about rescuing, it's more about a recovery. Three major tasks remains for the resettlement centers, like the shelters behind me right now. So authorities have mentioned to keep these shelters in, because for a lot of people now out of their homes, a lot of people are not really knowing when they can go back to the houses. For example, the village I am in, only 7 or 8 kilometers away from the epicenter, I've seen houses torn apart and fallen down, and also houses with cracks on their walls. And experts say they need assessment to see if these houses, people can move back in right away, or they need reinforcement. And second, it's about rebuilding the community. And again, as I mentioned, a lot of houses have been torn apart, torn down, and these houses definitely need repairs so that people in the resettlement centers can move back to their homes. And very importantly, that I think maybe perhaps the most important thing is to prevent hypothermia. As we know right now, for example, right now the temperature is 10 degrees Celsius below zero. Sometimes it can reach -20 degrees Celsius, very cold in northwest China. And a lot of shelters now are actually having heaters. They are coal-fired heaters, and a lot of these people living in these resettlement centers, they are going to set up bonfires, and so that doctors and the medical workers are cautioning people that beware of carbon monoxide poisoning. And speaking of medical treatments, earlier I visited one of the largest hospitals in the region, and medical staff from around the world are convening here in Gansu, and they're examining the wounded. There are still bone fractures or damages to the heads remain the top priority for doctors to really look after those patients. And of course, elderly and kids are the most affected. And we're hoping that we can see people return to their normal life as soon as possible. Back to you.
Shuxin Chen at the center of the earthquake in China. Thank you very much. Donald Trump's team has vowed to appeal against a Colorado Supreme Court ruling that bars the former U.S. president from running in next year's Republican primary ballot. This comes after a group of Colorado voters successfully argued that Trump was ineligible because of accusations about his role in the 2021 Capitol Hill riots. The ruling marks the first time a presidential candidate has been deemed unqualified under a rarely used provision in the U.S. Constitution, which bars insurrectionists from holding office. Trump's team called the decision completely flawed. An Italian court has sentenced two parents to life in prison for killing their teenage daughter after she refused an arranged marriage in Pakistan. In a case that shocked Italy, 18-year-old Saman Abbas went missing nearly 2 years ago, and her remains were found near a family home a year later. Her father denies responsibility, and her mother is believed to be hiding in Pakistan. You're watching CGTN. Still ahead, pressure mounts for a truce as the leader of Hamas arrives in Cairo for what's being called intensive talks.
Ever wondered what's the difference between a bear and a bull market? Where are the cash cows? And who are the lame ducks? And what exactly are black swans? Grey rhinos? And unicorn companies? Make sense of it all with Global Business, only on CGTN.
I think it should be more global cooperation.
I would like to hear more the voice of the developing countries.
Globalization has lifted more than 1 billion people out of poverty.
The green transition has to happen. It's a necessity.
Well, China and the United States are important powers in the world.
What unites us is much more than what divides us. And I believe China is committed to this agenda.
Join me, Juliet Mann, to set the agenda at these times every weekend on CGTN.
Events have consequences. Words create impact.
One more offensive in a long line of battles that's been ongoing for more.
Just got to be careful here with some gunshots. Excuse us.
The world today matters for your world tomorrow.
The number of casualties is growing quickly.
Why, this is one of the hardest hit towns in the region.
The world today, every day on CGTN.
Hello, welcome back. A reminder of our top stories. China's President Xi celebrates his country's close ties with Moscow in talks with Russia's Prime Minister. Our other headlines: search and rescue operations become recovery efforts in the aftermath of China's earthquake, where 134 people died. The leader of Hamas is in Egypt for what are being described as intensive ceasefire talks as pressure mounts for a truce. Israel said on Monday that it was open to a new temporary ceasefire. Meanwhile, the United Nations Security Council vote on a Gaza resolution is also expected to take place after being twice delayed as countries try to agree on the text. The death toll in Gaza is said to be nearing 20,000 people, and Israeli airstrikes are intensifying. Well, let's talk to our correspondent Trent Murray, watching events for us in Tel Aviv. Trent, intensive talks obviously ongoing. Any sign of an agreement being close?
No official announcement yet, Jamie, on an agreement, but we do know the talks are underway. Ismail Haniyeh, who is the leader of Hamas, flying into Egypt earlier today from Doha, where he is expected to hold discussions with the spy chief of Egypt around not necessarily a full ceasefire, we should say, but certainly a humanitarian pause, in the words of the Israelis. They say they are open to that as they desperately work to try and get some of those 129 hostages home, which are still being held by Hamas militants within the Gaza Strip. We know that the Israelis are asking for the focus to be on women, men over 40, as well as those suffering medical conditions. And these talks in Egypt follow similar discussions between Israel's spy chief and Qatar's Prime Minister. Of course, Qatar playing a vital role getting the original ceasefire negotiated last month, in which over 100 Israeli hostages were released. So look, still early days, but I think the fact that the two sides are sitting down shows there is some movement. And it should be noted as well, it's been a relatively calm day in the skies of Israel today. We've not had any rocket barrages now for approaching 19 hours while those negotiations are underway. We will, of course, have to wait and see whether there can be an agreement made, but certainly the IDF has continued to push forward in its military operations in Gaza.
The United Nations Security Council due to vote on this delayed resolution that we were expecting yesterday. I mean, is there a sense that Israel will take note and take any action if it is passed?
Look, it's certainly being reported widely that those UN discussions are underway. I think many people in Israel are aware of what is happening in New York. We, of course, know that this resolution just keeps getting delayed. It was meant to be held on Monday, then it was held on going to be held on Tuesday. Now we're being told today, and that is because all of this really boils down to the fact that they are trying to convince the United States to get on board. It's a resolution authored by the United Arab Emirates. We understand the US has been hesitant to include the word ceasefire in the resolution. Instead, they are agreeable, according to reports, I should say, to an urgent suspension of hostilities. But look, a lot of diplomatic negotiations still taking place, and quite a bit to untangle in order to see if they can convince the Americans not to exercise their veto power, which they have as a permanent member of the Security Council.
The diplomatic talks may be intensifying, but so too the military action.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, Yoav Gallant, the defence minister here, has been speaking overnight to the Times of Israel, and he said that the country will look to expand its operations into new areas of the Gaza Strip in coming days. We know a lot of the attention is turning to Khan Yunis in the south of Gaza, where, according to the Israelis, some of the leadership of Hamas are still hiding out, and they are trying to capture them. But we, of course, know that while those skirmishes take place, that civilians do continue to get caught in the crossfire of firefights between the IDF and Hamas fighters. Of course, the aerial bombardment as well does continue, which is adding to that mounting death toll. I should also just mention briefly, Jamie, a lot of the focus, of course, is on Gaza, understandably, but we do also just have to remember that northern border with Lebanon. Tensions there are boiling over somewhat today when the Israeli Air Force launched preemptive airstrikes on what they say were Hamas targets in southern Lebanon. Not often the IAF will launch preemptive strikes in Lebanon. Normally they will do it in response to incoming rocket fire from Hezbollah fighters. So the situation on that border as well remains quite tense as the world grows increasingly concerned about this conflict spiralling into other regions.
Trent, back to you during the course of the day. For the moment, thank you for that. Our correspondent Trent Murray in Tel Aviv. The European Union has agreed a major migration deal in a move hailed by EU leaders but criticised by some NGOs and migrant charities. The pact, which comes after years of divisive debate among the EU's 27 countries, will see member states share the cost and work of hosting migrants more evenly and limit the numbers of people coming to Europe. The agreement still needs to be ratified before taking effect next year. A volcanic eruption in Iceland appears to be slowing, raising hopes that nearby homes will be safe, despite warnings that seismic activity could last for months. Authorities have warned the public not to approach the area, but the spectacle has drawn many onlookers. The region surrounding the capital, Reykjavik, has experienced several earthquakes since October, forcing thousands of people to leave their homes. Supporters of green energy in Switzerland say they're not giving up after a large solar project was blocked in a referendum. The vote is something of a setback for the country's ambitious plan of installing solar panels on the top of mountains. Our correspondent Johannes Pleschberger reports.
Solar farms on mountaintops. Some people say it's the only way for Switzerland to generate enough electricity in winter, given the fog in the valleys.
Here we have panels which produce energy from both sides. In the snow you see the reflection of the sun, and exactly this reflection goes then to the backside of the solar model plant, and that's also one of the reasons why we have such high winter production.
Soon this mountain will be covered with 4,000 of these tilting solar panels. A massive investment, thanks to Switzerland's Solar Express law, which funds 60% of all new mountain plants built before 2025. But not everyone here is happy about the Alpine solar expansion. And it wouldn't be Switzerland if there wasn't a referendum. When asked whether an entire mountain in the Valais canton should be rapidly covered with solar panels, the population said no and postponed the planned construction. And one of the key people arguing for that rejection was a Green politician.
That was a very clear signal from the population saying, no, not like this. We want solar installations, but not in an untouched landscape.
The 56-year-old biologist is not completely against solar plants on mountaintops, but she says that first all suitable buildings should be covered with panels.
In these accelerated procedures, they just want to build. It doesn't matter what, where or how. So we said no. I'm convinced very few new plants will make it to the grid in the next 2 years.
Her opponent, Jörg Großen from the Green Liberal Party, disagrees, saying that the approval of Alpine plants needs to be accelerated.
I think it's a mistake to be against the Alpine solar, to wait and to discuss all the time, and because Switzerland is in winter time, we need to import power from Europe, from other countries, so it's necessary to have more winter production in Switzerland.
An alternative for Switzerland to become energy independent would be building another nuclear power plant, experts say. This, however, is strongly opposed by both sides of the green divide. Johannes Pleschberger, CGTN, Hohenberg, Switzerland.
And we've been looking at the arguments for and against this kind of solar project. There's much more on our website or our social media accounts. I want to take you back now to one of the day's big stories, the European Union agreeing this big migration change. It's been hailed by the EU leaders, but criticised widely by NGOs and migrant charities. Let's talk to our correspondent, Ross Cullen, who's watching the story in Paris. Ross, obviously a huge change and a major step by the EU. Give us some more detail on this bill.
Yeah, that's right, Jamie. The new pact on migration and asylum, a common system for managing irregular migration in the European Union, with new screening regulations and the aim to curb and discourage irregular migration. We've had some reaction from Ursula von der Leyen, the president of the European Commission. She was saying that quote, at the beginning of my mandate, I made a commitment to establish a common system for managing migration in the European Union. This pact will ensure that member states share the effort responsibly, showing solidarity with those that protect our external borders while preventing illegal migration to the European Union. For nearly 10 years, there has been a real focus on migration in the European Union, people coming into Europe, but there have been criticisms levelled at the European Union after the agreement, this late night, almost all-nighter in Brussels by the European Union from human rights groups and NGOs. And human rights groups and NGOs, along with universities, have also been criticising France for their new immigration reform.
I mean, obviously a huge change, and clearly not everyone is happy about this.
No, not at all. And some of the people that aren't happy about this include members of the French government. We've had the resignation of the health secretary. He has been replaced. He didn't turn up for a cabinet meeting this morning, Wednesday morning. He said he was going to resign over the fact that this new immigration reform has got through the French parliament. The majority, which is Emmanuel Macron's party, put together with the centre-right and the far-right, all of those votes combined meant that this got through the lower house. That was an embarrassment for Emmanuel Macron. The Marine Le Pen's party said they would join in and vote for this bill. It was far right enough for them to support it, being that far right, something that meant that dozens of Emmanuel Macron's own MPs abstained or didn't vote, or just voted against it as well. There's been real disruption within Emmanuel Macron's party about how to deal with this. The next stage for the bill is that it goes to the Constitutional Council, where it's likely they will strike down some of the more far-right elements of this bill. But it is an embarrassment for Emmanuel Macron, a victory, but at what cost? Because he's had several ministers threatening to resign. One has resigned. Dozens of his own MPs didn't vote for it, but the far-right opposition did.
Ross, thank you for that. Our correspondent Ross Cullen in Paris. The headlines again. China's President Xi celebrates his country's close tie with Moscow in talks with Russia's Prime Minister. Our other headlines: search and rescue operations become recovery efforts in the aftermath of China's earthquake, where 134 people died. And as we've just been hearing, limiting the number of people who come to Europe. The European Union agrees big changes to the way it handles migration. And that is the world today. Thank you for watching. We're back with more news at the top of this hour. Coming up next, it's World Insight. For now, from all of the team in London, it's goodbye.
Hello and welcome to Europe's weather forecast. Starting with atmospheric circulation, the upper-level low trough together with low vortex are going to trigger wide-ranging precipitation across much of the continent as we get into Thursday and Friday. Well, first of all, starting with weather conditions across much of the continent, by Thursday, you could have rainfall in much of the west into Central Europe. Sleet and snow could be expected for much of Western Russia and parts of Scandinavia. Then as we get into Friday, you could see the wet weather will expand into larger areas. Also, sleet could be expected in the Alpine region, and for much of Western Balkans, rainfall building up. Now, talking about temperature fluctuation, you could notice highs rising a little bit across Iberian Peninsula by Thursday, but on Friday, notice cold air will push in and drive down the temperatures. So basically, you're going to have the daily highs in the single digits or around a freezing point if you're living in Northern Europe by this Friday, and Minsk 3 to -2 over to Moscow, the highs be around a freezing point. Across Western Europe, you could see rain chances in London and Paris with daily highs in lower teens. That's it for now. Stay tuned for more city forecast.
This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.